Molly, help yourself. We have binders all over.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. But the first order of the agenda is to welcome Jeff Day, who has been doing a lot of work on a potential salt marsh or tidal restoration at Fresh Brook. And he has a presentation for us. He and I have talked several times. It's an interesting project. For those of you who don't know Fresh Brook, it lies between Lieutenant Island and the Audubon property. There is a stream which goes under Route 6, goes under the bike trail, and ends up at a dam that has produced a pond. But there's a question of, does it make sense to restore this property to help brook trout to regain their breeding grounds? So Jeff, if you're with us,
yes,
welcome, and let's get going.
okay, so can you share a screen with me, because that would be helpful. Excellent introduction, thank you. My background is in ecology. I work as a field biologist / fisheries biologist, but I am not a trained scientist. I'm kind of a DIY guy, but you'll see where that's going as we go forward here. I've been the executive director of Sea Run Brook Trout Coalition for 3 or 4 years. Took over from Mike Hopper, whose name we'll cover again. But I began doing fish restoration work in the early 80s on the Quashnet River. If that's not familiar to you, that's okay, but the Quashnet River is down on Falmouth, and it's where they first started discovering that they could restore habitat and bring back native sea run brook trout. And that has now spread to multiple streams, 5 or 6 streams on the Cape, and a number of streams in southeastern Massachusetts, and possibly Fresh Brook. Share the screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation. Who's in charge of the? Is it Laura?
So if you, I'm not, but if you move your cursor, you should see a green share screen thing.
Perfect.
So you can grab it.
Perfect. There we go. So in really simple terms, I got a lot of slides. I'm going to go through this very quickly. So we're in the business of researching, protecting, and restoring sea run brook trout populations and the habitat that they depend upon. We work a lot with Trout Unlimited, which is this next vision, and our mission and vision is very similar to theirs. However, we like the word research, and they never include the word research in their mission or vision, which I think is interesting. But I speak as Sea Run Brook Trout Coalition first and Trout Unlimited second. So this is a sea run brook trout that was caught in basically north of Buzzards Bay, Buttermilk Bay, Red Brook, which is the boundary between Wareham, Bourne, and Plymouth. It's on the other side of the canal, so it's not technically Cape Cod. That is, if you're not familiar with a brook trout is a fairly common spotted fish. And when it goes to the sea, it looks very, very different. The colors change in a radical way. So here you see a little bit of a difference. You see the silvery sheen, which is indication that it was just recently back from salt water. And they can grow big. We've seen them as much as 16 inches in these tiny streams. So here we are at Fresh Brook. You'll know you're at Fresh Brook when you see the unnecessary plastic object stores, one on each side of Route 6. Here's a sort of a larger context of what's going on. You see these names here: Red Brook, the Coonamessett, Santuit, Mashpee, Quashnet, Childs, Fresh, and the Pamet River, the Pamet River, forgive me, and Scorton Creek. Notice what happens. These are extirpated, which means the local populations of wild sea run brook trout that were once found in these streams are no longer there for a variety of reasons, of which I will not get into, but it primarily has to do with dams. So this is the location of our focus. You'll notice to the right of the rail trail, which is effectively the vertical line, is a little bit of a bulge in the stream. And that's what we call the impoundment, what John called the pond. I like to call an impoundment, and a pond is a pond. A pond is a natural feature. An impoundment is man-made. This is the crew that began a process in 2009. This is one of the first pictures taken there. Portnoy, Hughes, Derleth, Smith, and Hopper. I took the picture. So a little timeline, we met in 2009, that was the first meeting. We had not become a formal nonprofit organization at that point, but that's not relevant. We, in conjunction with National Seashore, in conjunction with a number of other agencies involved in this, engaged Stantec, which is a well-known consulting firm that does this kind of work, that did a site recon, which is available to you all if you're interested, for the Mass Division of Ecological Restoration. If you don't know who Mass DER is, they are the people responsible for removing dams and redesigning culverts and doing habitat restoration. And I presumably know you guys know DER because of the Herring River Project. 2016, we got Mass Environmental Trust funding that paid for a hydrodynamic study. We got this nice piece in the Cape Cod paper. We presented at the State of the Harbor. And 2019, Woods Hole Group completed the hydrodynamic study that was paid for by Mass Environmental Trust money. So that's also a document that's available to you if necessary. Back to Mike Hopper, and I guess I missed my logo there. Mike Hopper is the man who, in my opinion, and in most everybody's opinion, is the man who discovered that there were formerly sea-run brook trout in Fresh Brook. He's no longer with us. He was deceased in 2018. Mike Hopper, when I met him in the early 80s, was a kid whose parents owned the Wellfleet Oyster House, and he was in the kitchen doing all kinds of stuff, and we got together and started having all kinds of projects together in the early 80s having to do with seafood. Point I'm mentioning this is Hopper is the source by which that we know about sea-run brook trout in this stream, and I'll show you how that works. So he had a suspicion. Someone, when he was running his shellfish grant, somebody told him that there was a history of sea-run brook trout of large size, 2 pounds or so, that were caught in this place that emptied into Wellfleet Harbor many years ago. And Mike, being a trout angler, thought this was interesting. He stored it in his marvelous memory. And then randomly, he happened to be reading this book about Benson, who is a famous artist that did a lot of work in Wellfleet and Truro. And he found this report that is extraordinary. All drove to Fresh Brook, South Wellfleet, to try for trout, tied the horse, and fished downstream to the railroad bridge in the pool above the track, caught a 1/2 pounder, then another 1/2 pounder, then a 1 pounder. The others arrived. We caught from the pool 13 more fine trout, 15 fish weighed 17 pounds after they were brought home and washed. Pretty spectacular. Benson, there's a longer story. There was a fishing camp there. I believe it was a Benson, and other people purchased land and had this camp there for a while. This is a Mass Fish and Wildlife report that shows this nice map, and that E.B. Mercado was, I believe, a Mass Fish and Game guy in 1914. Says, excellent fishing has been stocked, never dries up. We also have records of being stocked through Benson. And then some further discussion, which is more sort of general. And then Steve Hurley, the biologist from Fish and Wildlife, went in 2008 and did an electrofishing survey and found no trout there. We were with him that day, and it was a really interesting day, a lot of mud. So in short, this is what it looks like from an aerial shot, a little bit better. And this is a project, part of the Stantec project, where they studied water flow and the water dynamics as it went through the 2 culverts. There's a culvert under Route 6, and there's a culvert under the bike path, and there's another structure at the bike path called a drop structure, which we're going to be talking about. Keep in mind, to the right of the bike path, I believe we have 100% ownership of the National Seashore. To the left of the bike path, it's many, many, many abutters and landowners and all kinds of interesting property issues. This talk and what we're talking about today only has to do with the right of the bike path. And the idea here is to eliminate the structure that's causing the pond. And that apparently is going to be a relatively simple thing. It's going to be relatively simple in part because it's National Seashore property. They are in charge because they're the authority, and it's simple as that. What may become a conversation is the reach to the west of that, between the bike path and restricted. There's lots of landowners there, and then of course further to the west of Route 6, there's also many, many landowners to the west. But we're really talking about the east side of the bike path for sure. They did a water surface elevation study, which enabled us to do the hydrodynamic study, which I'll talk about in a second. So this again is Steve Hurley's statement. There is potential for cold water restoration here. In his opinion, the blocked culverts under Railroad, the tidal restrictions at Route 6, and that it's primarily on National Cape Cod Seashore. And this was in 2009. We had all kinds of support. We still have that support. So generally, again, go up 50,000 feet. The native brook trout range is quite extensive, south of Long Island and north into the Maritimes and north from that. But we are effectively very near the southernmost range of the sea-run brook trout. But I think, relatively speaking, relative to water temperature and sea level rise, they are going to be with us for some time. It's hard to say how long, but they're not disappearing in my book anytime soon. This is where we have wild brook trout in Massachusetts. You notice there's very few brook trout streams, wild brook trout streams on Cape Cod. That's probably the Coonamessett. I'm sorry, the Quashnet and the Mashpee River, those two little red stripes there, and then nothing on the Truro Wellfleet here. And this is also one of the reasons that explains why there are so few wild brook trout is the incredible number of dams, and there's probably 10 times this many culverts, many of them undersized or inappropriate, not good for fish passage. So the objective, we'll do this a little bit out of order here. The objective, this is what's known as a drop structure. That's a weir. There are no stop logs in it. You can adjust it so that you could increase the level of the pond. But in terms of decreasing the level of the pond, you'd have to get in there with a concrete saw and remove that section that the water is going over. And you can see it's going into a culvert. This entire drop structure is being proposed to be modified so that the water level goes down to the water level, which is effectively halfway in the middle of that culvert. So it's a drop of 3 feet, 2 or 3 feet or so. So this is, again, the pond, and this blue line is a simulation of what happens if they remove that drop structure. The pond will not change in a lot of ways. It's going to narrow up a little bit. It's probably going to run a bit faster. It probably will dig sediments out. There may be some sediment that needs to be removed. But for the most part, it's simply cut the drop structure, shovel some rocks out of the place, and watch and see what happens. Those are my words. That's not official. We'll hear this from NPS and the engineer at some time in the future, but I should not be quoted on that. Let's suffice it to say it's going to be a simple procedure, presuming everything goes according to plan. So there's your drop structure, and you can see that it's relatively easy if you were to go in there with a fairly elaborate piece of equipment to cut that piece of concrete here on the right corners. That could be removed. This is what it looks like. I am literally standing on that drop structure. looking to the east, you see that pond. What we have at the widest portion of that impoundment, correct myself here, is about 80 yards wide, and it's about 1,000 yards long. And when that is sort of back to a stream, I suspect it's going to be more like 4 to 6 feet wide, to be determined. There's going to be a lot of factors that are going to cause that to happen. So ultimately, you'll see a lot of mud for a while, but that will probably fill in quite naturally. So this is Fresh Brook in 1893, and you see the little blue bulge where it goes from a bulge in between the rail trail and that Old Kings Highway is that line there. Little village was there, where that blue goes from a little bit of a more like a stream to more like a brook. We believe that's head of tide. So interestingly, head of tide is more east than the rail trail. So in theory, what we want to do is restore the entire environment back to what it was like before culverts, before a human modification. Now that may take some time. We're talking about the first phase here, which would be at the impoundment. This, at one point, we had an interesting discussion at the Wellfleet State of the Harbor. I think maybe some of you were there, about the rhetorical possibility of renaming Fresh Brook Trout Brook, because this 1910 map clearly has Fresh Brook and Trout Brook labeled backwards. But suffice it to say, it was called Trout Brook in this one map, and that's kind of an interesting thing. John and other people have shown me effectively 10 other maps that show that it's known as Fresh Brook. So I am going to defer to the 9 out of 10 kind of rule and say that this map is backwards and that's where we're at. This is again what it looks like. You can see that impoundment. It's fairly wide. Again, that measures about 80 yards north to south and east to west about 1,000 yards. So part of what's going to happen is, as there are no brook trout in this area, were there to become brook trout in this area, we meaning the larger we, have to transplant them there with the under the direction of Mass Fish and Wildlife and some science and other things to make sure that this is working the way it's supposed to. In fact, this has been done successfully. This is a picture of Steve Hurley, the biologist in '06, doing a reintroduction. Later years, we know that this worked. He did it again in another stream. So he's one of the few guys that we know in the area that's done native wild brook trout reintroduction. He is absolutely the only guy in Massachusetts. This is how they do it. We'll go through it very quickly. And this just basically proves the blue line, and the secondary blue line is showing how many fish were caught in those streams over the years through electrofishing. And I could get into that if you want to. Just so you know, it's of significant concern that while we might be able to remove the drop structure with a so-called simple act, deconstruction or destruction, the replacement of the smaller round culverts that go under the rail trail and under Route 6, replacing those to 8 by 8 foot box culverts, which is what was recommended by the Woods Hole group that did the hydrodynamic study. They claim that the water, the flow of the water, both tidally and from the brook, is heavily impinged by those smaller culverts, and they need to be replaced with these 8 foot box culverts. Well, guess what? That's not going to be easy. That's going to be not easy. That will require effectively an act of God, possibly an act of Congress as well, because it's, how would you do it under Route 6? And in theory, having talked to Mass DOT about this, they say, well, you know, it's not unreasonable to think about redoing all the culverts on Route 6 when the time is right and the money is right. And we can definitely, you know, slate this for that to happen. But that's going to require a moment when Route 6 is going through some kind of major change, resurfacing or widening or something of that sort. I don't know what, because there's no way they're going to do it just for brook trout. However, on one side, the east side, there is some substantial erosion that might speed this process up. And I haven't done anything other than to document this through time. And I don't know if you could see this, but there's broken pieces of asphalt there and a fairly rutted out runoff. And I've been there in the rain, and there's no question that the drainage that's supposed to handle the water that comes down here is not working, and the erosion is going to continue. And various people say that's absolutely quite bad. We did get some nice coverage in the Cape Cod Times, so people are quite interested in this. This was a result of the talk at the State of the Harbor. And I really think it proves that there's a broader interest in this kind of work. So this is Steve Hurley's sign. Is there a future for salter brook trout from Fresh Brook in Wellfleet? I think that there is, but it's going to require what we already have was the National Park Service to buy in. We're pretty sure they bought in. They have recently found some money. That money will be applied to another small engineering study specific to the drop structure. And when that is done, sometime sort of June to August timeframe, there will be another discussion about actually raising the money to remove that drop structure. However, because it's National Park Service, you tell me, does Wellfleet have to be involved, need to be involved, must be involved, or is Wellfleet sort of on a need to know or nice to know basis relative to this project? I don't know. That's a question maybe you can answer to me. Here's my contact information. This presentation is in a PDF form that I sent to John this morning. I hope it gets put into some kind of record. And this is some of the organizations that we work with as sponsors. So I am now effectively done with my presentation, and I want to give the share back so we can go back to the regular part of the meeting. And I don't know how to do that. Unshare. How do I unshare? Sorry.
You should be able to stop share at the top, I think it is.
I know. I'm looking for it. Any questions?
Does
People?
the state have to be involved, given that it goes over the bike path?
Well, the state would be involved in evaluating the health of the water after the modification, and then putting fish in. Stop share. I know I'm supposed to be able to do this. Stop share. So the state would be involved in that regard, but they don't have to be. They're involved in a sort of a nice to know, not necessarily need to know basis to be aware of what's happening for planning purposes. But they're not in. It's not, the state does not necessarily have to be involved. I feel terrible. I cannot undo this, and I'm sure I can figure it out.
Jeff, if you move the cursor up at the top, does it show where your share thing is?
Yeah, it says you are screen sharing, and at the bottom,
If you click on that,
pause share, stop share. There we go.
there you go. Okay.
Sorry about that. Who asked that question about the state?
I asked, I was just wondering, with the taking the cement away, would that impact the bike path at all? Is it?
No. No. The culvert runs under the bike path, and that will remain as is, protected, and there will be no ramifications in that fashion.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I had heard that Mass Audubon was skeptical about this project because they saw the pond, in quotes here, as being a place where migrating ducks could stop. But
Yeah.
From your introduction, I understand that either my information was wrong or that Mass Audubon decided on balance to support the project.
I believe I'm the source of that phrase. And I have not yet formally met with Audubon about this, but we do have a letter of support from Bob Prescott back in the day when he was still involved. And I'm in touch with Mark and Melissa. And I was planning to meet with them, but there's been no urgency in that. Part of the reason why is the authority is established. The entire impoundment is 100% surrounded by national seashore property. So if NPS wants to do it, I'm not sure. I mean, as much as Audubon may have an opinion on this, I'm not sure. I can't comment on that
Okay.
beyond what I've said.
I have a
I had heard,
question.
I had heard that the concern was actually raised by Bob, so.
Yeah.
Maybe my information is wrong.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
Tom,
as
do you
well.
have a question?
Well, you mentioned that that the seashore is totally, I mean, this project would be within the purview of the seashore itself, but I wonder if the town of Wellfleet might have something to say about it, even
Yeah.
though you know, it is within the seashore itself. I have a feeling that they're going to want to be involved to some extent.
Yep. Well, at the very least, this sort of nice to know, need to know, but I anticipate. So from a sort of a fluvial morphology perspective, there is not likely to be much of a change, if any, to the reach between Route 6 and the bike trail, and there's likely zero change of the reach west of Route 6. However, it's absolutely incumbent for Wellfleet to be involved, because at some point the discussion will come up. They want to work on the reach between 6 and the rail trail, and by then we may all have moved on to other things. So I want to put this in the record as, let's make sure Wellfleet is aware of this, because this may come up 15 years from now, and for all I know, I'll be in California.
Jeff, what would you like us to do?
Just put it in the archive.
Well, I tend to be more proactive than that.
Okay, well, no,
What I'm
and
thinking-
yeah,
What
go
I'm
ahead.
thinking is I should, if the other members here agree, write to the seashore with a copy to officials in the town, probably the select board and the conservation agent, and say that we support this.
That's excellent. Okay, I appreciate your support. That's marvelous. And
we
I think
haven't
that's
we
the
haven't
appropriate. Go
We
ahead.
haven't voted yet, but if we do that, what I would
Okay.
do is draft a letter and review that with you, and then bring it before this committee at our next meeting.
Marvelous.
Is there any, to members of the committee, is there any objection or concern about the process I outlined? Or is anyone not supporting of the project? Otherwise, I'd like a motion to go ahead and write a support letter as I described.
I do think. I have a question first for Jeff. How you doing, Jeff?
Good.
Um,
Thank you.
so this is what it sounds like to me is that this is going to be multi-phases, kind of like the Herring River is. So the first phase would be dropping the level of where the impoundment is back there by removing that one little piece. Is that correct? That obstruction there?
Yes, Val, very
And
good.
once that's done, that would be it for a while. You're saying that the idea is, let's see what happens, you know, put it, you know, in gentle terms, make sure that everything's fine. My concern is what does happen with all that extra flow that goes through and the scouring that's going to happen at the culverts as they
Sure.
narrow.
Sure.
Has somebody looked at that?
Yes, this is the job of a fluvial morphologist, and I can sort of tell you what they think. And they think that what happens is over time, the sediment simply moves out. The Thalweg, which is the original stream channel, will reemerge, and that sediment will simply move downstream and move out into the flats and disperse itself down below. It will not be a lot of sediment because it will happen relatively gradually. It's also impinged by the small culverts under 6 and the rail trail. So the high speed sudden flow of zillions of gallons of water is not likely to happen. But I really want to defer that question to an engineer, a fluvial geomorphologist person who can answer that in more detail, but generally very little will change. The other thing that will happen is science is going to be in there to measure the changes. Not sure who that's going to be, but it will involve the state of Massachusetts. And if the changes are appropriate and sufficient, the water temperature is low enough to support brook trout restoration and reproduction, then brook trout are likely to be reintroduced. But that's not going to happen until, N years later. That's not happening the day they cut the panel.
And is that going to be something that is going to be dependent upon having those 8-foot wide culverts under Route 6 and under the bike trail?
To be determined. I would like to think that the cold water comes up from springs when the Thalweg, when the original stream bed reemerges, there'll be a gravelly bottom there, which will have upwelling water from springs. We know there are springs there because we know the geology, and something is filling that pond, that impoundment up, because there's flow, very clearly flow. It's not coming from rain. It's not coming from somewhere else. It's got to be coming out of the ground. That groundwater, which is cold and rich with oxygen, when that starts flowing correctly, and we can monitor and trust and count on that, that is going to be, a couple of summers later, then the decision might be made. But in my opinion, that we don't know means we don't know. But we have to measure and observe, and 2 or 3 years after the cut, we may know more. It's also true, so a couple of other points that I did not make. It's also true that stream crossing standards and federal culvert standards and federal highway standards may very well cause the 2 culverts to be naturally scheduled for replacement, and that may happen quite naturally. So that may just happen without intervention. The other thing I want to be very clear about is people have asked me if there are other species of interest in this system. And while I have not observed them directly, I have observed otter scat all over the place, which looks to me to be full of herring scales. But I'm not an expert in that, and I would like an expert to get in there and confirm or disconfirm, and I suspect NPS probably knows. But if they're herring in there, that's great, and that is one more species in favor of restoration, because while they can deal with these pipes and these culverts, they would be happier, the population would be bigger, were it 8-foot by 8-foot box culverts, where the river is able to move naturally.
And just sea run brook trout are anadromous, just like herring, so they would spawn up in the fresh water and live their life at sea. Is that correct?
That's a bit of an exaggeration, but they do that. They live in fresh water and spawn in fresh water, and they occasionally migrate out to the ocean. The ones that do migrate out to the ocean are what we call true salters, because they go out and feed and gorge and grow very, very fast. We've seen fish grow 4 inches in a season, which is extraordinary. But not all of the brookies in the brook will go to the sea, but they will all benefit from the sea protein, which would be baby elvers or baby herring or whatever else is in there that they will be eating year round or seasonally. But yes, they would go to the sea, but our data is only about 1/3 of them. I'm sorry, only about 2/3 of them go out into the salt water, and there's sort of a 1/3 resident, 1/3 marsh, and 1/3 sea-oriented fish. But that's based on one study.
Understand.
Yeah.
See,
Herbert?
This sounds to me like a smaller model of the project of the Herring River restoration. And
Exactly.
I think that would give us the answer of Wellfleet's interest or participation vis-a-vis the National Seashore, potentially in this project.
Exactly.
And I think it would behoove us to understand what Wellfleet's relationship to the National Seashore is in the Herring River Restoration Project before we make a comment to the board on this project. Because I really don't know what, I'd be interested to know what, well, the town of Wellfleet's interest in this will be.
The town, so Hopper, as I said, was a resident of Wellfleet from the 60s to the 80s. He knew everybody in that era, and everybody knew him. I don't know, maybe some of you knew him or recognized his face, but he had support from the town of Wellfleet from the very beginning. And in one of our documents is a signed letter from the town of Wellfleet supporting this initial project, at the research phase, which is in one of the documents, which I'm happy to share with you. The name does not ring a bell. But he also went into the Historical Society because he knows Joan there, and they helped him find an original pencil drawing of the village and some other stuff that's also part of the original documentation. So this goes back to the Wellfleet town fathers in 09 or so, town fathers and mothers.
I think listening to this discussion, this letter I proposed writing has to have some cautions and caveats in it. I think the main thing is we do or do not support moving ahead with these studies. We do or do not hope that we get to a point where we actually get some brook trout in there spawning and using the facility, but there's a lot of steps on the way.
Right. Yes.
Getting anything to happen on Route 6.
Yeah.
Lots of luck.
Even
If
worse.
there are more questions for Jeff, let's have them, but we do have lots of other things, including a discussion of a parcel, which is a long fresh brook that's intended for Conservation Commission control.
West of Route 6, is that correct?
West of Route 6.
Yeah.
So Jeff, thanks very much.
Okay.
Is there any, Jeff, is there any deadlines coming up where there's like funding available or something where you're worried about not proceeding quickly with this?
Not at this time. There are cycles like that. One just ended, but at this juncture, I'm going to say this with all hope and optimism, and I'm not entirely sure this is true, but I believe optimistically that this project, removing the drop structure there, or cutting the drop, putting a notch in the structure to lower the water level there, will cost Sea Run Brook Trout nothing, will cost town of Wellfleet nothing, will cost state of Massachusetts nothing but time. Until we get into more actively monitoring and putting in temperature monitors and whatever technology we want to put in there, which is very inexpensive, which is something I'm happy to do out of our pocket. Very, very, very little cost. Now, granted, NPS may come in and say, oh, no, there's all this money that Wellfleet's going to have to contribute to do this. I can't speak for them. And I want to be very clear that what's going to come from them may be different than what I'm saying. For now, this is what it looks like from here. And any other questions? Any other questions before I bail? Because I know you guys want to get back to what you're doing.
So you're hoping that the park will pay to remove the drop thing?
That is correct.
Have they indicated to you whether that would come out of special funds or from annual operating funds?
Unknown. The park has not been articulate about this, and I don't expect them to. I understand how this works. they may come back to us and say, well, it's going to cost us 20 grand and we'll pay for half of it. For what all I know, they may do something like that, but they may not. They just came up with order of magnitude about that much money for this study from money that came out of a project that went under budget. That kind of thing happens maybe what, I don't know how many times in 10 years. So it may be waiting for that kind of money. It may be real money. It may be something else. So it's unclear where that money is going to come from. But we may be coming back to you about that. But no one has said at this point, Jeff, your job is to go out and raise money for this.
John, the Park Service is going to receive a very considerable sum of money for the Herring River restoration. And they're not likely to get any of the big cuts until that's underway. And that's the correct priority, I think.
And I've been at this for over a decade. I'm quite aware of the fact that these things move along at the speed of decades. I think there was one last thing I wanted to say. Whatever it is, we'll probably respond, have some commentary by email. My email is in this. I'm gonna sign off unless anybody has any last comments.
There's one more discussion here that I'd like you to hear about. We've got Bruce Herter with us.
Yep.
And Bruce is chairman of the Open Space Committee, which has a planning to put before town meeting a plan to manage a parcel along Fresh Brook.
It really isn't fun.
Yeah, but go ahead. I may be, you've got the floor. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me just, with our article, what we're looking to do is to put two pieces of property. Both of them are entirely marsh areas. One of them is map 42-137. The other is map 30-186. And they're both about 3-acre pieces of property. The map, to start with, the 30-186, that's up in Blackfish Creek, is completely surrounded, because I know, if we were convinced that we were interfering with any of these projects, we wouldn't even bring it forward. If you guys decide not to, we won't do it. But that area in Blackfish Creek is completely surrounded by Audubon preservation, by Conservation Trust preservation. So it's just a piece that we're sort of looking to, finalize, put that together.
Bruce, let me jump in on this one. I personally think that's a no-brainer. It's out in the marsh. It's surrounded by other conservation area. That's just completing the process of protecting the Blackfish Creek marshes. So I would move that NRAB recommends to town meeting to pass that, pass the article about 3186. So if no one objects, I would like a second and a vote on that.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 5-0 on that. Go ahead, Bruce.
Okay, so the 42-137 really is not along Fresh Brook. Fresh Brook runs next to the Audubon property and just south of Blue Heron, the bottom part. Blue Heron's a circle, the bottom part of Blue Heron Road. This piece of property, and I don't know if you can see this, I'll put it on, but it's actually by Aunt Sarah's Way. It's significantly north of this, John. It's not even, you have to go all the way past both Blue Heron Roads and up to the top. I'll try to, let me see if I can get up, mark this. Well, I doubt that you're going to be able to see it, but I wasn't able to put this together, but let me see if that, can you see those two pen lines that I put there?
No.
Is that showing up? No. Okay, but again, what this is an area that it's got to be half mile. It's going to be a long way, John. It's not even close. This is the area that goes up. Let's see if I can find some other. But again, Fresh Brook going into Trout Brook, and those are well marked on the map, abuts the Audubon property. And so it goes right along the Audubon, and God, I think everybody knows that area. This one is right at the bottom of Bayberry Trail, the Bayberry Trail. So that's all town-owned and Conservation Trust-owned property that's significant, right off Lieutenant Island Road. And it really is not abutting Fresh Brook at all. It's half a
So-
mile to
So-
more away from Fresh Brook.
So my bad. So I think you feel comfortable that, first of all, that this parcel will not be significantly affected by the restoration. And second, that it would not interfere with a full-scale restoration project, which would involve some considerable construction at Route 6.
Right, correct. And it's also a significant distance from Route 6. If people picture Lieutenant Island Road down to Bayberry, it's really significantly removed. And I apologize for not having the bigger map. I think we sent out the map of that property. But it's, you know, from everything I'm hearing, I think it sounds like a wonderful project. Like I say, if NRA, we've never moved forward with the project, then NRAB did not, okay, we wouldn't do it. But it's just not, and I apologize for not having a good, you need the whole map to get a picture, but it's significantly away from this project. It doesn't come anywhere near Fresh Brook.
We've
It doesn't-
talked about that parcel before, I believe, haven't we?
It's been
Yeah.
approved twice by this group. What's happened is because of some glitches in the town process, we're back for the third time on this, but it's one of the reasons I'm pushing it. Otherwise, I'd say, okay, get it. But
So are
it's-
you looking for a recommendation?
We are.
Yes,
So
we need to make a vote. John, are you going to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. What's the map and parcel?
42-137.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
I move that we support the Open Space Committee in their efforts to put parcel identified as on map 42 as parcel 47. Is that correct? 42.
What we actually are doing, John, is making a recommendation to town meeting to support the warrant article, which refers to 42-137.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to support the warrant article in regards to map 42 parcel 137.
Is there a second?
Second,
I see a second from Tom. Vote, please. Aye.
Yes,
Aye.
Okay, Bruce, thanks for stopping by and clarifying things. I will send an email to Rebecca and asking that this go on the warrant article as a recommendation to town meeting
John?
from NRAB. Yeah?
yeah, I'll make a motion about Fresh Brook too, if you want.
I think we need to, I was listening to the discussion, John, and what I'd like to do is to draft a letter, and at our next meeting, we would agree or not. I think we all support the principle. I don't think we need that. I think what we need is some sort of action, and that's the action I think we should take.
Well, what's going to be the next step then? Because I was just going to support their efforts to explore the ramifications of lowering the level of the impoundment as phase one of the restoration. And
Well, I think
see what, other than that, what else are we going to do,
John, the reason I want to go with the letter is I want us to be on record and communicate to the park and communicate to the select board and communicate to the Conservation Commission that we support the further investigation about this project.
All right.
I think if we just took a vote now, that would fade into the far distant future and no one would pay attention. I think, if we write to the select board and they say, we think this is important, useful work needs to be done, I think that carries some clout.
So who's gonna write a letter? You want me to make a motion to have you write the letter?
You want to go ahead and make a draft? I'm always willing to have somebody step up, John. I know you're a
I'll
supporter.
I'll take a stab at the Fresh Brook thing. Yeah, I'll write a letter. And so we'll discuss it at our next meeting. I'll circulate it and we can talk about it then. Is that right?
I think that's what I had in mind. I think that's the best procedure.
All right, I'll do that.
One thing I want to say, if I can, and thank you for letting me do this, in observing both Fresh Brook and Trout Brook and having a discussion with a number of people, it's become a possibility to start thinking about having a conversation about removing the water control structure on Trout Brook proper. I believe that's town land. I'm not sure. And I'm not proposing that we make any decisions at this time, but I will pick it up with John or John at some time in the future, because that the opportunity to improve the habitat in that area will benefit by removing the dam from that system for a variety of reasons. And you might even get trout in there too. But anyway, suffice it to say, John, Dwayne, we'll pick it up later. Any last questions before I go? Because I want to leave you guys to you all to what you're doing and get out of it. Any other questions before I go?
Jeff, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you. Thank you so very much. I'm leaving the meeting. Have a great day. I love Wellfleet. Take care.
Okay.
And
Go on.
thank you, John, for the listening and the support. Appreciate it.
Well, I was down the wrong track literally, so I'm glad you
Yeah.
corrected me. NRAB charter. John, Dwayne and I had a meeting with the Shellfish Advisory Board. Had a good discussion about our charter. Also a good discussion about the town meeting warrant article about a new Curley report. Put some memory to this, the concern we had about the current charter is it never mentioned the ponds. And so now we propose, instead of talking about the as item 1 is creation of a harbor management plan, we now have creation of a harbor management plan and a pond management plan, each on roughly a 10-year cycle. So that says we have a continuous process for both harbor and ponds. It's a second, I think that's fairly straightforward for us. The second item under the charter recommendation involves or not involves shellfish. And as it stands now, it says the continuous review and updating of the shellfish management plan and the harbor management plan. And I have for some time felt uncomfortable about this because it suggests that the Shellfish Advisory Board in some sense reports to the Natural Resource Advisory Board rather than to the Select Board. And I've been through a gazillion, that's a large number, of ideas about how to rephrase item 2. And the one I've come up with now is work with the town and town committees for follow-up to implement the harbor and ponds plans. So that says that we need to cooperate with all the town committees, in particular the Shellfish Advisory Board. But it doesn't imply any hierarchical difference. If we agree with this language, and we don't have to, the step that would be taken would be to see if we can put this article on this spring's town meeting since the original charter was voted by the annual town meeting in 1987, any changes would have to go before town meeting. Discussion.
John, it sounds good, and I think we could move right along with this if someone, unless someone objects to it, but it seems to me you could ask for a motion.
Discussion and then a motion. So if that's a motion, I'll second it and then we'll continue the discussion.
I'll second,
well-
yeah, that's fine.
It's fine.
I'm fine with it too.
I'm fine with it.
So the motion is to have John sent it to the select board, is that right? To put on the town meeting warrant?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
By the way, it also talks about 5 members. I'm gonna change that to 6 because I'm actually trying to recruit somebody else. And we're 5 now, and I don't want to have to throw anyone else off.
Why don't you say a minimum of,
It says at least 6.
okay, well,
I guess, okay, but I don't want it to be at least 6 because then we're stopped I see what you're getting at. Let me think about that language. I'll adjust that language so that,
You don't want to back yourself into a quorum problem.
yeah, that's exactly what I see.
How about alternates? Aren't we entitled to 1 or 2 alternates? There's usually 5, what are we, 5 member? or
How do we-
5 member?
How do I say 5 members plus an alternate?
That's fine, that gives us 6, so we could make 2 with up to 2 alternates too.
Hmm.
I mean, it would be optimistic to think we're gonna get people, but you never know.
Okay, 5 members and 2 alternates.
And I think that we should be trying to recruit people anyways, just because I think the Fresh Brook thing, if people start hearing about it, you might get somebody that's a restoration enthusiast in Wellfleet that might be on board with that project. Anyways, just my thought.
With that change, so of at least 5 alternates and 2,
Five.
up to 2, 5 members and up to 2 alternates.
Yes,
I'll take the at least out of there. I'm
just say 5 and 2.
5 and 2, right? That way we are, we don't run into a problem. All in favor?
Yes,
I'll send that to the select board. We shall see what they wish to do with it. As I say, it has to go before town meeting, so if it doesn't go this go around, it's probably a year out, and I'd rather have it acted on, and I'll make that point when we go before the Board of Selectmen. The article about the Curly at 60,000 is on the town meeting warrant article. And I just wanted to make one change about the summary discussion, which will be printed on the town meeting warrant. And I've gone through several manifestations of change, and this is where I'm at now, and I will then let you all have a crack at discussion. It says, first sentence says we're seeking funding for an overview survey of the harbor, and that was in the harbor management plan. Second sentence says it replicates an old 50 years old study. We plan third sentence, we plan a broad survey of harbor life, finfish and wild shellfish at the top, phytoplankton and harbor grasses at the base. The final sentence in this paragraph follows again from a very interesting discussion that John and I had with the Shellfish Advisory Board. And it says local knowledge will be consulted throughout, because there's several people on the Shellfish Advisory Board spoke up with some interesting comments, especially to investigate specific locations, for example, culching or wildlife, for example, diamond black terrapins, both of which occurred in this discussion, which are integral parts of harbor life. So what this commits us to doing is first of all, to do a broad survey, but secondly, to follow up or include some local knowledge suggestions. And the difference there is important because the basic survey is has to have a certain looking for the right word, independent strength behind it. That is, we're looking at, we're not picking the best places in the harbor. We're trying to take a broad, statistically justifiable survey, which is what the original Curley survey was like. But then we're saying, well, we will also include some investigations based on local knowledge, and what the people with the local knowledge are doing is pointing out some particular high spots that they think ought to be recognized. So the summary then ends up with a new paragraph that says we view this as a critical step in preserving the health of the harbor in view of climate change and other environmental impacts.
John, can I just interrupt for a second? Is that what
I'm done. Go on for discussion now.
Yeah, okay, so here's my first thought is to properly look at this, I don't really know what we're talking about here. I don't know what the goal is. Are you looking for comments on what to tell, what's going to be printed in the warrant?
Yes, that's what I like to do is.
To revise our ad copy sort of for the warrant, is that right?
Yeah, that's what this goes into the warrant.
All right, well, it would be really helpful because I looked at the document and for instance, the section that you had put in bold, which I guess was new language, was that right? I'm just not sure what we.
I'm changing that again.
All right, so the best thing to do is either if you could screen share it so we can all see it and look at it and edit it, that's fine. Otherwise, we need to circulate it around again and look at it. We need, so it's hard to comment on it when I can't see it or have it in my head. The only comment I had really about it was there was a word missing early on about, there was the word of was missing somewhere. It was a very simple grammar thing.
Yeah,
Other than that, I did not understand what the bold was supposed to say. So if it's been changed, I guess what I'd ask you to do is send it around to the rest of us so we can look at it. Or screen share it right now if you can.
Well,
Let me just see if I can find it and share it, John. Have you
yeah,
changed?
but the version I'm talking about, I only did this morning, so you won't be able to see it.
If you can shoot it off as an email to the rest of us right now, that's fine. Otherwise, is there a deadline coming up where we need to have any language changed?
I'd like to get something done now before the board starts. Let me send it out as an email.
All right, because I got to tell you, I thought early on, months ago, that the summary that we included for the town meeting warrant looked really good. And I think brevity is going to be the key. I don't think we need to get really elaborate about it. I think that we should try and squeeze it down, make it easy to comprehend what we're looking to do, and let the town vote on it. And I'm kind of confused also about the funding right now. Have they agreed that the town is just going to go ahead and pay for this?
It will be a loan. The way it works is it will be a loan and it will have to be approved by vote.
All right, but the town funds it. In other words, so that's the way it's gonna come up, not to borrow the money, but the town to pay for it. Is
I
that
think it-
correct? Because I had heard originally that the new town administrator was very enthusiastic.
The way it's written, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds or borrow for the purpose of broadly investigating.
So that was the second part of it. Now, again, I think in order to look at, I think what the best thing to do is, why don't you just put down exactly what you wanted to say, and we can look at it. I mean, if there's a way to do that right now, we could do it right now. Otherwise, we need to meet again and, look at it and discuss that one thing.
Okay.
I think the easiest thing, I don't know when you're planning a next meeting, but I think the easiest thing to do is send us around what you've got, and let's take a look at it and see if there's anything, because other than that, I don't know what we're sending them. And I think honestly, it's been so long for this Curly report. I think that we ought to get it right before we submit it. So that's my comment. I really can't comment on this right now until I see what it is in front of me.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, I just.
So if you have your document open, John, and then you click on share, and then,
I thought I had set this up as an email. Let me see if. Let me try this. Let me try this again. I really would like to get this sorted out. I'm sorry for all of the delays. I've been we've had a fairly hectic why can't I?
you in Arizona?
Yeah. I can't figure out why I can't get this thing sent. I'll try one more time. I see what I'm doing wrong. Okay. One more try.
For those of you that are in out in the cold, there's a guy running a lawnmower outside my window here.
I was gonna say, I thought I heard like a jackhammer going on or something.
I think I finally managed to get this sent.
So we're looking at our email now, is that right?
Yeah. And I thought of a way to simplify.
I've got it.
All right, I see something from you, John.
John, do you think you need to have the examples in there, or simply say local knowledge will be consulted throughout, especially to investigate specific locations, period?
I was thinking exactly the same thing. So if that's a change you're recommending, I'm with you. Keeps it simple, but it makes the point that that follows from the discussion with the Shellfish Advisory Board, that we can learn a lot from local knowledge.
Well, it leaves it open for, you know.
Yeah, it still means we have to have a scientifically sound basis behind the broad survey. I'd like to turn that into a motion, Tom.
Yeah, let me just, I'm almost finished reading. I'm sorry, I'm slow here.
All right, no problem. We got.
I didn't get it, but I trust Joe.
Yeah, I didn't get it either.
Oh. Let me then read what I think the article will say if we accept what Tom said.
The first paragraph is perfect, John. That sounds great. The summary, I'm reading it right now and it looks good so far. If you want to just go ahead and read it if you want.
Well, if I take Tom's suggestion, the article itself is not changed. But
He's just talking about the summary.
the summary, which is basically communicating to the voters, why on earth are we doing this? This article seeks funding for an overview survey of life in Wellfleet as recommended by the Harbor Management Plan in March. It replicates a Division of Marine Fisheries study, which is now 50 years old. We plan a broad survey of harbor life, finfish and wild shellfish at the top, phytoplankton and harbor grasses at the base. That is, it's local. And then the final sentence, if I've got Tom right, is local knowledge will be consulted throughout. Did you have something beyond that, Tom? Yeah,
Well,
local knowledge will be
John?
consulted throughout, especially to investigate sufficient locations, period.
All right, John, can I make a comment here before we move further?
Yeah,
The way you read it is perfect, but you have the word nearly in there. It says, which is now nearly 50 years old. Just get rid of that word nearly. It doesn't need to be in there. It is 50 years older. It is 50 years old.
thank you.
And it sounded better when you read it without that word in there. So you probably just meant to get rid of it. So that's the one change I would make there. And then, so here's local knowledge will be sought instead of consulted. And consult's all right, but I think sought is what you really mean to say there or want to say that. That would be my recommendation, to change that word. The specific locations, for example,
We're leaving out the, for example.
yeah,
I'm gonna leave out that the whole bit that starts with the for example and ends up with harbor, integral parts of harbor life. That just confused.
you know something, John, you could just say local knowledge will be sought throughout, period. And then end it right there. Because I think that when it comes to the locations and the study itself, that's going to depend on who does the work and what we get recommended to us. So I think everybody knows that.
Okay.
Investigate, for example, culturing or wildlife, for example, you know, the terrapins. I don't really think any of that needs to be in there.
So here's what we have now with comments from Tom and John. This article seeks funding for an overview survey of life in Wellfleet Harbor as recommended by the Harbor Management Plan in March. It replicates a Division of Marine Fisheries study, which is now 50 years old. We plan a broad survey of harbor life, fin fish and wild shellfish at the top, phytoplankton and harbor grasses at the base. Local knowledge will be sought throughout.
I would move that we accept it as John just read it.
I agree. I'll second that.
Further discussion?
You do have a whole nother thing in there, John. What's below it here? So that's good for that part. Now, what's all the stuff below? NREP views the work as a critical step in identifying and preserving the health. Okay.
That was already in there anyway.
Yeah, but well, that's good. That can go in there. And after that, note.
Well, that note is.
That's gonna be gone, right?
No, that note is going to be part of the article itself. And that note was written by the town administrator, and he's been very supportive of this. The Board of Selectmen, Select Board has been supportive. You may remember that we were all set to do this a year ago. And they,
right. So, all right.
They used the wrong language in the warrant, and because the language was wrong and it was in the warrant, they had to just say we can't have a vote on it. So we didn't have a vote on it.
Well, here's my question. I just don't understand why that whole note, this article was pulled from the ATM warrant at the last minute. You're talking about the last warrant, right? The last meeting.
A year ago.
A year ago, right. Funding was not being available. Below is a draft if it were to be funded via borrowing. Well, so what are you proposing here?
I'm proposing that we go with this.
But the whole note in there, I don't know what the note's doing in there.
Well,
I mean, that's very confusing to me. The whole note. Is that like a lawyer wrote that, or somebody, the
Yeah.
TA wrote that?
That's standard. That's just standard language to get the money.
Okay, well, here you go. Why does it have? Why is it saying note this? Why do we need to know that it was pulled from the ATM?
Yeah, that was just explaining things
And-
to the other
All
select
right.
board members.
So what about below is a draft if it were to be funded via borrowing? So is that going to be?
That sentence, those two sentences that start with note are not going to appear in the warrant. That's just
Okay, there you go. So bottom line is you're going to delete that, and it's going to below where that about the, about Resources Advisory Board, it's going to just go right into, all right, the advisory board then is going to be to see if the town will be, okay, so all that language that goes after to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate transfer.
That's the article, isn't it, John?
the article itself.
Yeah,
Up at the top, it says Article YY
Yes,
to see if the town will vote. That whole article is going to be supplanted by what's below the note below to see if the town will vote.
Okay, so the bottom line is it's gonna go ATM, article, okay, article YY. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and or, so what's gonna happen with that whole first paragraph you got under article YY right now?
That's irrelevant.
So it's gonna be pulled, is that right? So it's not gonna be in there anymore.
That's right.
So it's gonna go right into article YY, and then it's gonna go to see if the town, so that basically, that's the way it's gonna read. It's gonna read ATM warrant and a request revised.
That's actually that's standard ATM language. There'll be other articles on there that use the same language. It's a way.
Okay, so
getting
just
us
so
money.
I'm clear, right under where it says ATM 2022 NREB request revised, is it gonna say revised in there?
No.
No, okay, so, okay, so then it's gonna say article YY, and after article YY, it's YY, instead of what it says now, it's gonna say to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds or borrow.
The short paragraph is going to be thrown out and the long paragraph is going to be stuck in.
All right, so I see what you're trying to do. That makes sense. And if that's the way that it's supposed to be, that's fine. It looks like that language below is all typical if you were gonna borrow the money. I thought we weren't gonna borrow the money though, that we didn't need to borrow the money.
The problem last year, John, is we should have borrowed the money, but they put the wrong they put the wrong legal language, so we couldn't borrow the money, and they didn't have the cash in hand because
I see.
the
So
town-
that needs to be in
town is
there.
practically bankrupt, so we got pulled. This'll get us a vote.
Okay,
May not be the vote we wanted, but it'll get us a vote.
well then I will make a motion to approve this unless there's some comments about everything below the note there. I didn't read through it real carefully. It looks like typical language that you would put if it was gonna, if that's what we want. So I would vote to approve this under curly ATM and then just say article YY and to get rid of that whole paragraph that says there right now. And in place of it, you put what was below borrowing period, and then just to say to see if the town will vote to raise. I know what you're trying to do, so does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, well, so there's my motion. If you wanted to, I guess I'd request that you circulate it around to us just to make sure, but that sounds like it will work.
Okay.
So there's my motion as revised.
I'm not sure if we have two motions or one at the moment.
Well,
So,
the first motion was to simply approve the change in the summary. And I don't know that there is any issue with the actual article itself, but I'm
Let's vote on Tom.
confused.
Let's vote on Tom's motion about the summary. I think we have a motion and a second for that. So let's vote. All in favor?
We have a little discussion. I haven't read it.
Discussion.
I have a little bit of a concern of voting for something I haven't read. I didn't get this now. I don't want to hold it up, though. Can I abstain from voting and you still are able to pass this?
Hang on.
Pardon me? I
yeah, we have
understand.
enough, we have enough for a quorum, you know.
The
Yes.
summary was the only thing that was changed on the summary was to simplify it. And this, to simplify it to simply say local knowledge will be.
I just got it.
consulted,
Do you want me to share it?
period.
I'd be happy to read it too if you want, Herb. It's not that long.
I just got it. Do you want me to share it?
Sure, let's just put it up there. so we just-
Wait a minute. I thought bother.
You may have,
Yeah, no, it's my fault again. I thought I typed you, Herb, and I didn't.
that's fine.
I'll read it short. I'll read it briefly, all right?
Yes.
I think I
Okay, here, right
I just said it.
after,
Wait, I just sent it. Let's see if it shows up. What I like is these nice, well-organized meetings I'm putting on.
Let's go.
I could actually edit this too, now that I think about it. Why don't I just do that?
Can you see it now?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay.
So Herb, the changes we've talked about were in the first line after, this is the summary only,
Yeah.
after overview survey, the word of, overview survey of life in Wellfleet Harbor.
Okay.
Second, in the second sentence, instead of talking about a study which is nearly 50 years old, we're going to talk about 50 years old.
Okay.
Nothing in the next sentence. And in the final sentence is greatly simplified. Local knowledge will be sought throughout, period.
Good.
Then it goes to NRAB views this work as critical, request of the Natural Resource Advisory Board, and that whole big paragraph, what John and I were talking about is that whole big paragraph at the bottom.
Yeah.
Will replace what is currently in Article YY, because Article YY did not include a possibility of borrowing. And frankly, the town doesn't have any, doesn't have 60,000 floating around. It's got to borrow it. So I think if you start with Tom's motion, that changes the language in summary. And that's been seconded. And so we're just looking for a vote.
Okay, let's vote on it then. I'm fine with voting on it.
So
And
John,
I'm
I'm gonna do
actually,
this.
I
Yeah.
actually just finished, I think I just put it together here, so.
I think it's that, right? Can you see it?
Whoops, I got rid of the summary. Yeah, here we go. Summary. NRB views this work as, okay, here we go. So this is a new document. I'm going to call this.
So are we voting or what's happening here?
Yeah, so what I've just done is I've just saved it as what I believe is the final version here, and you can look at it. I'm gonna just say Curly JD is what this one's called. So save. Now let me send this off to you guys. Okay. I'm just gonna hit reply all. Oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. So I have just sent this. Guess I need to attach it. Apologize for taking so long here. All right. So take a look at this, John, everybody. I've sent you the document. You should all have it. And this, I believe, is what we discussed. I got rid of what needed to be gotten rid of, and I think I cut and pasted everything in there like the way it should read. Tell me what you think.
I haven't gotten anything.
It just
Oh,
came.
there it is. All right, I just got
So
it.
basically what you're looking at is it's under its ATM warrant request. I should have got rid of revised in there so we can get rid of revised. Just say it's the ATM warrant request and then it's Article YY and I put the big long thing in there about borrowing. And then there's one more paragraph, which is the summary, which ends with throughout, and that's it.
I think,
Oh,
Right.
I think you have written, John, what I thought we were talking about.
I believe I got everything in my scrambled
I
mind
believe
here.
we've covered this ad nauseum.
What?
I think,
So I will move that we approve the NRAB request language. And I will send this to the select board and ask them to, what, all they will have to do is change the summary. And I'll do that through Rebecca Eldridge. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Herb, you on?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay. Sorry for the confusion. I just say I kept making last minute changes. I wanted to talk briefly about the ponds. Herb and Laura put together a terrific document about the sequence of steps in creating a Wellfleet pond management plan. I don't think we should go through this in detail. I'd just like to know if there are any comments or concerns, and then we put this to a final vote at the next meeting.
I'd just like to say
To
that
you.
it looks like a lot of work and effort have gone into this, and you guys are to be congratulated for what you've done so far.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I, just a couple comments on it.
Sure.
Our approach to this comes out of the years I spent on Gold Pond Area Conservation Association, trying to get anyone's attention on any type of management of the ponds. And the problem I always ran into was there was always a subjective discussion. Have the ponds deteriorated in this way or have they not? Are they clear? Are they less clear? Is there more foliage, less foliage? And we never moved off that dime. And that's why I'm really committed to our doing a pond management plan that is based on objective facts. And the only way we can do that is by doing some significant work in the beginning, and that is agreeing on a set of criteria that can be used to measure the current state of the pond. And we're talking about 8 ponds. Each of the ponds are in a different state. And we've probably come across, I don't know, 10 different criteria, maybe a dozen different criteria. I think we have to boil that down to 4 or 5 criteria that we can use as objective measurements of how the ponds are right now. And it's oxygen level, it's nitrogen, phosphate content, et cetera. But we'd have to get some agreement on those. And then I think we have to have as a goal in this plan, a statement in this plan, that the management, we're creating a plan to keep the ponds at this this present defined state for a 10-year period. If we don't have those 2 objective statements, we're just going to be making, frankly, I think, meaningless comments that are not actionable. I think Laura made the point that this, whatever we're doing has to be actionable. And I think what, if I can speak for Laura and I think what we'd like to do is start doing some work on this and contact and trying to get a consensus among the various groups that have been testing the ponds, the town, the APCC, National Seashore. If we can come up with a consensus of a manageable number of criteria to be used in measuring the ponds. And with the group's agreement, I think Laura and I would like to start working on that between now and the next meeting.
I think we're also looking for everyone's agreement just to the general goal that we're all looking to create some sort of plan that will govern trying to keep the pond's health where it is now.
Yes.
Decade. I mean, that's number one.
Well, I certainly think that getting started on that sooner rather than later is terrific. I had two comments. One is that you listed all of the great ponds, and I would suggest for an initial phase to prioritize those. I think there's more issues in Gull Pond than in Dyer, for example, Gull and Long Pond. Just look at the data and prioritize those, and let's aim our cannon at the ponds which seem to be most likely to enter a realm of real problems. There's lots of cyanobacteria. The second thing, Laura and Herb, is I would like, if we decide to, if we are in a position of recommending an action plan, that's going to be expensive. If we're talking about, say, Gull Pond, putting an upgrade on septic waste management is not cheap. So we have to have a clear action criteria, and I think that it's not clearly enough enunciated, I think, in this plan. What I'm thinking as a possibility is that we go to APCC and we say, look, we've agreed that the key criteria are nitrogen, phosphorus, and temperature. And what combination of those criteria do we say we've got a small problem, a big problem? What triggers a major remediation program? How far along are we? At what point do nitrogen, phosphorus, and temperature say, boy, you got to do something big and you got to do it in a hurry? And I've actually never heard this from APCC. I may have missed something, but I think that's important. These criteria trigger an urgent need for action.
My concern in that, John, is that there's such a range of eutrophication in the 8 ponds under consideration now. Williams Pond is advanced in eutrophication, and there's a concern, there's a danger of its really ceasing to be a viable pond. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Duck Pond, which is pristine. And I'm trying to wrap my mind around how one would make the call, whether it's more important to retain Duck Pond, and so there's an absolutely pristine pond in the town, or to save Williams Pond in its final stages of eutrophication. It's a very difficult judgment call to make.
We actually talked about this as to whether it's almost 8 little plans within a big plan, because they all do have individual characteristics. And then we came back around to, that's gonna be too much for everybody to comprehend. We probably need to just focus on a broad one across all 8 ponds. But I take your point on Gull and Long certainly have the most activity on them, so
Yes.
it makes sense to put them in the top of the list.
So couple of comments. First of all, it's not clear to me that the situation in Williams Pond is human driven. It's shallow. Is this just a natural process or not? I mean, that's a real question, but I think it ought to be answered. I would love to see Duck Pond at the top of the list, because it's with all respect, Herb and Laura, it's my favorite pond. But you only got one resident. You got one resident there, and
That's why
one landing.
Yeah.
If you want to, if the process is to control the septics, that would be a great test site, because I think you would get a total positive response from the owners.
Yes, but okay, I can understand the necessity to prioritize ponds. It probably should be then by use and by number of habitated properties adjacent to the pond.
Herb, it's not just a question of prioritization, which is very important. It's a question of being able to convince the residents who surround a pond, or the owners of the property who surround a pond, or frankly, who are in the watershed of the pond, that they've got to do something. And testing is critical, but you have to be able to say, by looking at what's happened at other ponds in Brewster or Harwich or wherever, that if you exceed certain limits, you've got a big problem, and we don't want to get to those limits. So it's not just a question, as I say, it's not just a question of priority, it's a question of convincing the abutters. It's a question of convincing the Conservation Commission, the Health Board, that we need to do something and do it quick. And here's how we're going to go about that.
Well, Williams Pond, interestingly, has deteriorated to its present state, which you can just loosely put from being swimmable to non-swimmable, in the life and ownership of the current residents of that pond.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about 100, 150, 200-year-old process. The current residents can verify the deterioration of that pond during their lifetime on that pond. Susanna Dice is very articulate on that. And she talks about it during her lifetime as child to an adult, of the rapid deterioration of that pond.
Well, I don't want my role to be just to ask challenging questions, but someone may ask, well, has Williams Pond so far gone that it can't be rejuvenated? And I think that's a question that would have to be asked and answered.
Well, I think that's why it's important for us to understand as a goal, as Laura said. I think it's beyond our scope to talk about rejuvenation. We're talking about maintaining the current status of a pond. And if we're looking at a 10-year period, the hope is that over that 10-year period, there will be an improvement of wastewater treatment of one type or another that is going to remove, reduce significantly effluent going into a pond, and hopefully at a lower cost than what we're looking at today, or other measures that are not yet in use. But I think it's beyond the scope of this plan to look in terms of remediation. That's why what Laura said earlier is that I think as a committee, it's important for us to agree at this point that the goal of the plan is maintenance of the current status.
Okay. I'm not gonna quibble. I think the main thing is it's a good outline, and I think we all agree we want to get started on it. Are there any other comments or discussion, concerns?
Laura, are you willing to start working on with me on pulling this together? And
Yep, absolutely.
ask the board's agreement that we'll start contacting people at APCC and within the town on this, gathering the data.
Yes, I agree.
Gathering the data is going to take quite a while.
Yeah.
Do you need a motion from us to approve this, or?
I don't know.
I think we all agree that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I think the message to Herb and Laura is we support you. Let's get on with it.
Keep up the good work.
And
Absolutely.
when we get to something which is more actionable, then we'll take a vote. I've got one idea of funding, so I'll send that out as an email to Herb and Laura.
Okay. And Lauren, why don't you and I get together, not today, but some other time soon, on what data we should try, and we should say that we're going to be able to bring to you at the next meeting at least hopefully a presentation of what we think the criteria, or what we have been told the criteria should be. Because it has to be, we have to boil the criteria for testing down to a fairly concise group if we're going to get any hope of funding to do the testing.
Herb, Laura, something else I was just thinking that you ought to be thinking of, and this would not happen until after town meeting and the town election. At some point, we ought to go talk to the Board of Selectmen about what we're doing. More for information and to get their support than asking them to actually do anything. But keep that in mind. I think it would be useful. It doesn't hurt the fact that one of the members of the select board happens to live on or near a pond, so that would be useful.
And we have two friends of the ponds on the board at the moment.
John and Helen.
Yes, John and Helen.
Okay. I think you'll find all of the members are supportive. We just ought to inform them how we're proceeding to go forward.
Yeah, I do see John from time to time and just informally talk about what we're doing.
That's terrific. I encourage that.
Yeah.
I see. So brief comment on dredging alternative. There's been an interesting twist. I was talking to Mark Borelli and Agnes Mittermeier of the Center for Coastal Studies last week, and they think that there's a possibility that they could do some additional research that would not deal with the black custard after it's been deposited, but actually slow down the rate of deposition. And that would be a fascinating idea, because preventing a problem is a lot better strategy than dealing with a problem after it exists. I haven't much more that I can say about that. We will, I'll follow up with them, and we may learn something more. The harbor oversight board is interested in this too, and I asked Mark to get in touch with the representatives of that committee. Herb, Laura, next meeting, I think we'd like to put you guys first on the agenda. I'm sorry we had to scramble a bit here, so just let me know when you think you'd like to come back to us with some more detail about the way you want to implement your planning.
All right, I do think that our next step is going to be involved in talking to probably APCC, probably the Seashore, Sophia Fox, and trying to pick their brains on what the criteria are. So we will be getting the word out there that we're working on this.
Okay,
I think I'd also like to talk to Suzanne Thomas.
that's great. Just that, just keep us informed when you get something useful to talk about. Let's be sure we put it front and center on the agenda.
Okay.
Phew. This was a bit of a scramble. I'm sorry it took a while to get started. Thank you all for your discussions. Enjoy the sunshine. Oops. I think that's something that Tom and I can say, but it's a lovely sunny day here.
When are we meeting next?
Depends a little bit, John.
All right,
I think in 2 or 3 weeks, the new thing we'll have is a draft of a letter about Fresh Brook. If there's been any concern from the select board about either the charter revision or the ATM revision, we'll have to deal with that. Those things plus the ponds, I think, are what's going to be on the next agenda. 2 or 3 weeks.
all right, I'll basically say by then, I'll have something to say about Menhaden. They're fighting today over allocation and who's gonna get what. There's a draft of an addendum coming up, so that's gonna be finalized today for public comment. So I'll have that at the next meeting. And the other thing is, can you, or do we need to make a motion to have that Sea Run Brook Trout Coalition PowerPoint put on our website?
I will do that.
That'd be great.
Well, do you want?
Just put it as a link. Put it as a link underneath the town website. Underneath NRAB's website.
All of the slides that Jeff showed us.
Yeah, I got it as a document sent to me, a PowerPoint document or Adobe. It looks good. Give some people something to look at about it.
Okay, well, I'll try to do that, and if I run into a problem, I'll consult with you.
Yeah, I think you'll have to have Jeannie Mack or somebody do it for you.
Yeah, fair enough.
I know Laura and I are not going to have data ready in 2 weeks.
No,
And I'm away all of next week for work.
You will have, well, when
talking about
you've talked to the seashore, when you've talked to APCC, when you talk to any people in Wellfleet, I mean, I think you have sort of a, go talk to the people you need to talk, and when you've got something to report back, let's be sure we hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
I'll also just let you guys know that the Shellfish Advisory Board is meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. And one of the things that's going to be up for discussion is that whole property, they built a property and moving the boundaries in. And the one thing is, and the ARC and the fact that they are no longer, that they're a corporation and they own the one lot. They have a lease for one property over there. So if anybody's interested in ARC and whether they should be able to continue as a, to have their lease here in Wellfleet. It's something, I don't know if you have been paying attention to that, but it's been, there's been some people that apparently want that to revert back to the town. And, ARC's been there since 1982. And anyways, it's going to be discussed. If you need more information about it, it's probably online. So we're meeting at 6 tonight, if anybody wants to know about it.
John, just a quick side, I don't think I'll be able to make it, but moving the HIDLA boundaries in is of course consistent with sea level rise.
Yeah, and that's gonna happen. That is actually, I think that already got approved at the last meeting, yesterday, or whenever that was, the select board meeting. I think they agreed that everything was gonna get moved in as it was drawn on that new map. So it's gonna help navigation. It's gonna be a good thing, but there's an issue with the one property that I think it's parcel 792, the one that ARC leases and has been leasing. They grow shellfish, they experiment with shellfish there, and they want to continue doing it, but they're also selling it. And so anyways, there was a whole discussion that's on the select board's video. You can watch it, but that's going to be discussed tonight. And my personal opinion is that we should support ARC being able to stay there, because we get a lot of those shellfish. People buy them from ARC. And anyways, that's my take on it. They've been there for 40 years. And they've been good stewards of the property. And it just happens that somebody used to live in Wellfleet that works for ARC and now they don't. So the ARC is a corporation that's based in Dennis, I believe. Anyways, that's the story with ARC. And I think it's a good thing that they're allowed to stay there.
I'll have to leave that up to you, John, because I think your reasoning sounds good, but it's not really a subject that we've talked about, and I would hate to go further out on the limb.
Right. All right. Well, it's going to be discussed tonight, just so you guys know.
Okay. Meeting
All right.
called to
Thanks.
order. Thank you
you.
very much.
Guys,
Appreciate very much the time. We actually achieved some things. So be in touch and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Bye now.
Yep.